Our next speaker in this plenary session is the Secretary of Natural Resources for the state of California. And he's going to share his vision for natural resource conservation, biodiversity conservation at a statewide level. It's the 30/30 program applied to an entire state. So welcome, Secretary. And I want to let you know that there's a very interested audience in what you have to say about what you're doing here in the state of California.
Absolutely. Well, Jack, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be with you all here and now. I think for those of us who do this work, safeguarding the environment, stewarding our natural resources, this is a really unique moment. On the one hand, the challenges that we face as a planet or a nation or a state are daunting. Climate change in California now means catastrophic wildfire season bearing down on us, the second straight pernicious mega drought in a decade, and extreme heat across our state that we've never experienced. Climate impacts are here decades before scientists predicted. On the biodiversity front, we're seeing threats across our planet to this natural richness of life. Scientists call this the 6th major mass extinction event in the planet's history. And in California, one of 36 biodiversity hotspots in the world, we face significant stressors to maintain this biodiversity. And then likewise, California, like so many other places in the world, this challenge with the COVID pandemic laid bare just significant inequalities and inequities across our state. So we face some real challenges, Jack. But of course, what I'm really excited to talk to you about are the solutions. And the set of solutions that I'm excited to talk about today revolve around nature. And I saw a great headline in the Washington Post recently that said, "Nature will help save us if we give it the chance." And so in California, we're on this journey. And you mentioned the 30 by 30 goal to conserve 30% of California by 2030. That's a galvanizing target to step back and to really understand how we are managing our lands in the state. We're a big state, about 100 million acres or 40 million hectares. That includes built lands supporting a population of 40 million, working lands, our farms, our ranches, our commercial forests, and of course, natural areas that include some of the most iconic places on Earth, in my opinion, whether it's the Big Sur coast or Yosemite, so many places. And so right now we're focused on how do we harness that nature? How do we conserve and manage that nature to address our climate challenge, our biodiversity crisis, and growing inequity? And in California, we think actually nature is a key piece of the puzzle of solving climate, restoring, I should say, removing more carbon from the atmosphere through our trees and our soils, protecting communities and natural places from these climate impacts. Obviously, better management of nature will conserve our biodiversity and conserve our ecosystems and our habitats. And better management of our natural places will allow for more equitable public access into nature. So we're really excited about nature-based solutions. And of course, President Biden is leading on this topic in the federal government with his 30 by 30 goal. Jack, I'm so pleased that there are scores of countries around the world that have signed on to this high ambition coalition to protect 30% of their own lands and waters by 2030. And of course, this is all what scientists tell us is necessary. I Hold Half Earth by E.O. Wilson, who's suggesting, of ultimately protecting half of the Earth to save ourselves and our fellow species. So I'll just say, I'm really excited to be doing this work. 30 by 30 has galvanized thousands of people across our state, experts, groups, to help us understand how we reach the 30 by 30. And I want to thank you at Esri, because you all stepped up and agreed to partner with us and bring your technical and technological sophistication to step back and to take a scientific and a data-driven approach to meeting our 30 by 30 goal. So I'm excited to talk about that with you here today.
Well, that's really exciting to me. You're making my heart patter here. E.O. Wilson has come to our conference, and many of our users know him quite well and his work. So the fact that you showed that book, everybody just fell in love with not only you, but also this ambition that you have, that's for sure. Well, what specifically do you think are the big challenges to making your vision come alive? I mean, you talked about data-driven initiatives. Our users are really anxious to know how they can participate and do the same sort of things, you know, that you're doing with their leadership and with their people.
Well, I know a theme of your convening this year is really balancing our environmental priorities, our economic priorities, and our social priorities. And that's exactly what we're working to do in California. We certainly, in our agency, prioritize climate resilience and biodiversity and equitable access to the outdoors. But of course, Governor Newsom, our leader, is also prioritizing building more housing and addressing affordability and continuing to allow and support our economic growth through the economic use of land, whether it's in agriculture or in commercial forestry or fishing. So while we need to do more to conserve our nature, and that's really the driving force of 30 by 30, we have to balance this amidst a number of priorities. And that's really where Esri has come in with your geospatial approach to really understand how we utilize this 100 million acres in California to meet all of those priorities together.
Yeah, this approach that you said, a geospatial approach, I would call it a geographic approach. Built on, you know, science and science-driven, that brings together all the different forces of economics and a healthy society and, you know, the sustainable resources of our environment. This approach, as we're describing it, integrates all the information, and it allows us to create holistic approaches and you know, doing geodesign, designing a future which is more sustainable, but also deals with making all the trades at the same time. So you want to tell us a little bit more about the specifics of your program?
In California, everything we do on environmental management is driven by science. And we're so proud of the scientists that do their work in our agency and across our state government. Historically, a lot of that science wasn't able to actually utilize technology. And increasingly, our scientists are able to integrate technology. Great example, our talented team at Department of Fish and Wildlife used to maintain a biodiversity atlas that was, in essence, hard copy. This was a while back. And now has, of course, shifted to a living biodiversity atlas. This is happening across state government and will be aided by this California Nature platform that, of course, we're working with in partnership with your team, Jack.
You know, it just reminds me, Secretary, that, you know, our federal agencies are doing the same thing. They're making their data available, which we are incorporating in our living atlas that we are using as a foundation for this. And they also have a vision for creating an atlas for conservation and stewardship, which is going to be made available across the entire country. This is working with DOI and USDA and NOAA and NASA. I mean, it's I wouldn't say they're inspired by you, but they're doing it coterminous with you. And as I look to the future, these things will increasingly be brought together with geospatial infrastructure for open sharing and new forms of collaboration.
Well, and it's so powerful to have that technology available to government and public sector organizations because the science, you know, is so important, and that's actually driving management. So having publicly accessible, transparent technology that really allows for utilization of this science, I think, can be a real game changer.
Yeah, you know, the big thing that inspires me about being with you is that technology is not enough. You know, we can do all kinds of interesting tools and infrastructure building, but it really takes leadership. It requires also, you know, chopping wood, hauling water kind of work like your people in California are doing, building the data, getting it digital, making it available, building the apps, connecting with people, working with communities, all those amazing things that your agency really exemplifies.
But likewise, Jack, I would say leadership is not enough because we could have the best of intentions, but given the complexities of conservation, science, these, you know, priorities, we need technology. So it's really the marriage of the two with some other factors in there that I think is where the magic can happen.
Are you going to show some of it to us?
Yeah.
Are you going to do the demos? Are you going to do the demos yourself? That's what I want to know.
No, like many things, I have somebody smarter who I'm going to introduce in a moment to actually do that. But I'll tell you that, I talk about our 30 by 30 work as a journey. Governor Newsom issued an executive order last October to establish the 30 by 30 target. And we were so gratified when President Biden, shortly after he came into office, announced a national 30 by 30 goal. And this year is spent really interacting with all of the leaders, academic institutions, scientists, community groups across our state to establish what will be a pathway to 30 by 30. And key to establishing that pathway over the next decade to conserve 30% of our land and coastal waters is that decision support system. And that's where Esri and the state are in a formal partnership to actually build out that platform or that system called CA Nature. And in order to drive this 30 by 30 process, the governor was really smart to recruit someone named Jennifer Norris, who comes into state government as our first deputy secretary at the Natural Resources Agency of Biodiversity and Habitat. And she brings with her 15 years of experience at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and a expertise as a PhD biologist to help our efforts to support this pathway to 30 by 30. So Jen, I'm so glad to have you join us to talk about just what you've been up to with Esri in developing CA Nature.
Thank you so much, Secretary Crowfoot. As you have said, we are committed to conserving 30% of our lands and coastal waters by 2030. We want to do so in a manner that protects biodiversity, combats climate change, increases equitable access to nature, and safeguards our economic sustainability and food supply. There's never been a better use for GIS and technology to enable our efforts. It can help us provide a baseline assessment of the amount and location of lands and coastal waters currently conserved in California, establish a process to track and account for progress toward 30 by 30, and identify conservation opportunities to help California and its partners achieve our goals. The system we are building is called CA Nature. This will be a publicly accessible suite of interactive mapping and visualization tools. CA Nature will integrate information about biodiversity, climate change, and access, so we can view and analyze different features of the landscape in one place. It will allow us to identify places across California where we have the best opportunity to protect biodiversity, combat climate change, and achieve equity. We will use CA Nature to assess what percentage of California is already conserved and track our progress together. Our CA Nature project is comprised of 5 main pillars. Starting in the upper left, the foundation of it all is the GIS, or the environment for modeling and synthesizing the state's best science. Moving around to the right, next is the best available data. We're going to integrate and share content to advance understanding and support our analyses. Next is planning applications, which are a major component of what Esri is helping us build. This will include things like data exploration apps, focused planning apps for identifying conservation opportunities, and monitoring dashboards to track progress over time. Next is capacity building. Esri is helping us build the skills we'll need to effectively maintain, administer, and grow this system into the future. And finally, the heart of the entire effort, the outwardly facing web hub site, which serves as our communication vehicle through which all Californians can gain access to these resources and engage with our process. So let's take a look at the conceptual design of CA Nature. Starting on the left is the content or the source data that's feeding it all. We're taking multiple different sources of data, normally found in different locations, and bringing them together into one platform. Moving to the right, data is then leveraged for analytics and modeling, populating the open data portal, and streamed into applications for additional context. Next, focusing in the middle, the open data portal will house data organized around biodiversity, climate, and equity, as well as the databases that track protected areas. Moving to the top, this content will then feed a suite of applications for actively supporting conservation planning and tracking progress. Moving to the right, these tools will be made available to local governments and groups throughout the state to use in guiding their local decisions about which lands and waters to protect. And finally, as entities take planning and conservation action, their newly protected lands will be included in the protected areas database in the center, and again, summarized by dashboards at the top to track progress over time, thereby creating an integrated system for achieving 30 by 30. We are also now actively developing our first tier of applications related to data exploration. The sample app shown here is our early version of the CA Nature Biodiversity Explorer. It's being used to showcase the state's biodiversity data in new ways, such as with summary histograms that allow users to contextually view multiple variables and detect areas of desirable characteristics. We're especially excited to see our data displayed in new, innovative ways that really allow us to get the most out of what we know. In the months ahead, we'll be working to develop planning and prioritization apps that will synthesize this content and help to support conservation action. So that was a quick tour of CA Nature and our project and how we're working toward 30 by 30. I'll turn it back to you, Secretary Crowfoot.
So I'm very excited about this technology system, this geospatial system that Jen just shared more about. And also really excited to share that information on California Nature, this platform, and all of these 30 by 30 efforts is actually available on a website that we've built, californianature.ca.gov. And that is really the home for all of our work in the state on nature-based solutions. So for those that want to learn more about that, about our work and about that data system that Jen just summarized, please do visit californianature.ca.gov.
What else do you want to say about this particular effort? What challenges do you face in terms of communities and getting involvement to make this thing really come alive?
Well, I would say 30 by 30 is galvanized by leaders stepping up and setting an ambitious goal, whether it's President Biden, other national leaders across the globe, or our Governor Newsom. But it won't be achieved by those leaders. Ultimately, collaboration across the board and across a lot of dimensions will be needed to actually meet our 30 by 30 target. That's collaboration between local governments and agencies, state government, federal government, tribal government, community-based organizations, environmental conservation nonprofits, hunting and fishing groups that focus on equity. So it really needs to be, the goal is driven from the top, but the solutions are driven from the grassroots. And I'm so gratified that CA Nature is actually going to be a public system that will not only help our decision-making, but will help decision-making at the granular community level so that everyone will have access to the state-of-the-art data system in planning the future of their own communities or natural places that matter to a very specific region. I'll also say that this can't be a one-size-fits-all across the country or across the state. We're a big state, and we know that the challenges and opportunities are very different, whether it's on climate change, biodiversity, equity across our state. So again, this is a leadership-driven target and a broad technology system, but ultimately one that we think gets utilized across regions. And I guess the last point I'd make is that we should have optimism. The challenges have never been greater to our environment, our planet, even our way of life. I mean, at this very moment, wildfires rage across California, tens of thousands of acres with thousands of people evacuated. Our drought means salmon are hanging on this season in some of our rivers, and that some communities are running out of water. So clearly, you know, the challenges are almost unprecedented. But I will say this is a moment in time where we have leadership across the world, across the country, I would say in our state, to meet the challenge. And I think this 30 by 30 is a galvanizing target, really like none other on environmental conservation. And I'm hopeful that in coming months, in coming years, we'll demonstrate real progress to restoring nature and conserving nature. And I think what I've seen anyways is, again, when you give nature half a chance, it's resilient. We're seeing California condor come back in California. Governor Newsom and I were just up with the Yurok tribe in far northern California, who are actively involved in restoring condor into their ancestral lands that have been gone for 100 years. We've seen sea otters come back on our mid-coast. We're seeing beavers repopulate our rivers. This can happen, and it will happen if we actually marry the political will with the scientific understanding and the technology tools. So I have to say, I'm really, really excited with all that we've done, but will do together moving forward.
I'm absolutely thrilled, Secretary. This has been a really great conversation. What I get from listening to you is, one, leadership is very important. Top down, your relationship with the governor, seeing it, driving it, but also your interpretation of bottom up, getting communities involved, getting them engaged. We heard from an earlier speaker from the Kellogg Foundation, and they quoted Mr. Kellogg. He said, "I learn much more by asking questions than telling people what I know." And that really resonates with me, and you just remind me of him in so many ways. He also said that through cooperative planning and intelligent study and group action, then communities can really make a change. And so I'm thrilled about that dimension of both your and the governor's personality, but also this entire initiative. The other thing about opening up and sharing the knowledge, both as a web service so people can do it themselves, but also opening the data, collaborating with our federal agencies like USGS, Department of Interior, USDA, NOAA, NASA, all of these organizations. They're not only, by the way, giving their data to this effort by way of the Living Atlas, and it's getting integrated in, but also we're able to contribute back to things like the protected area database for a kind of national strategy. And then finally, by the way, just sharing your model. And some of it comes through your personality, but also your staff, the idea that you're willing to share as a model. You sometimes said California first, but well, I just say California is definitely participating and putting footprints down that we can all copy very much. So listen, I'm thrilled that you were able to share this, and I know our users around the world look at California. It's going to be opening up again, and like you, I have a very positive spirit about that we can turn this around. I mean, it's what human beings are really all about. So thank you, Secretary. Any final words that you want to share?
I would just say, let's continue to learn from each other. Best part of my job is I'm learning every day. And at the last international conference I went to before the pandemic, I learned so much actually about our coastal resource management. For example, from nations in the South Pacific that have been exercising environmental conservation for thousands of years and built in that indigenous knowledge. So I think with your network across the world of Esri users, we have so much to learn from each other. And I think if this 30 by 30 movement grows, as I hope and I expect it to, I'm really excited to continue to work with you to utilize technology, to take wisdom, to take learning from different places, to not only improve our efforts in California, but really across the world. So I would just say Godspeed.
Godspeed, yes. Building a kind of infrastructure, an intelligent infrastructure that can create a more sustainable world. This is the big challenge that we're all thinking about right now. And thank you for your inspiration. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity, Jack. Good luck.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the conclusion of 4 amazing speakers. We heard, of course, from a person walking around the world, Paul Salopek, who's sharing his experience bottom up of what he sees with indigenous people around the world and the effects of climate change. And we moved on to listen to one of my new best friends. This is Lejeune Montgomery Teberon, who is working with Kellogg Foundation on issues of racial equity and seeing it through the geographic lens, and working with communities and the UN to make us a better world in that regard as well. And then of course, through Enrique Sala, who's amazing work, and I know that the Secretary enjoys, like I do, oceans and ocean conservation and marine conservation. His work, I think, promises to really get it together at the ocean level. And finally, concluding with Secretary Crowfoot, a vision and taking the vision to practice, which is what we all have to do. Move like the speed of light, because it's late in the day, but it's not dark yet. That's your big message, Secretary. And so thank you, thank all of you, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.